Legend has created the Good Enough virtual concert series in response to the rise in suicide and depression since the onset of the pandemic. He is on a personal crusade to bring greater understanding of mental health issues, tangible support, and hope to people struggling around the world. Through the Good Enough series, he combines music, teaching, and mental health education, including conversations with his own counselor. And I've actually seen those on YouTube, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But the events are designed to actually connect those in need with tangible resources while also raising funds to subsidize counseling expenses for as many as possible. It is a unique vision and it is making a profound difference in the lives of many. And I'm very pleased to have him in the studio. We're going to be talking to him today about the Good Enough virtual concert series, including both the initial one as well as the more recent one that's here in 2021. We'll also talk with him about the Safe House Project. As many of you may know, the issue of domestic sex trafficking and working with survivors of sexual abuse and sexual trauma is a passion of mine. So to hear Legend talk about that is really a treat for me. So I want to thank him for coming to the stage and sharing the wealth of knowledge that he has in this topic. Legend, I want to thank you so much for being here. I basically gave you glowing praise for all the wonderful work that you're doing. And I don't know if you heard what I said earlier, but I am a big proponent of any work that's going to help in domestic sex trafficking and the work that you are doing. We want to talk about that. Of
Okay,
course, we want to talk about the Good Enough concert series, but
absolutely.
thank you again for coming to the studio. We are in debt to you because of the work that you're doing to increase mental health awareness, but you're also putting feet to the vision. And I love it when people don't just talk about, oh, we need more mental health services, we need to do a better job. You're actually doing something about it. So please tell us what you are doing to make a difference, to make an impact.
Well, thank you, doctor. And I want to make sure that I pronounce your name correctly. So please forgive me for asking this on it. It's Dr. Bergina. Am I saying that correctly?
You got it right.
Just got
See,
to make sure. I hate getting people names wrong.
people from Tidewater area, they can always get it right.
So, man, shout out to 757. Um, yeah. So what I'm doing with Good Enough is we're hoping to use grid art for a great message. I love using my music for tangible, like you said, tangible, actual help we can give people. I started going to counseling March 2020 before anybody knew what COVID was going to do, and when my calendar got cleared because of all the things, I wasn't too busy that I didn't have the opportunity to sit and heal. So it was a blessing, and that became, man, this has really freed me up. How do I get this message to other people? Never been anti-counseling, sent people to counseling all the time. I'm in ministry, but like I just didn't go for me. And so by the end of the year, we were like, how do we create a virtual experience where you can have a concert, good music, get the gospel, and get some help, at least destigmatizing or actually connecting you to counseling if you need it. So we did one as kind of a test called God is Iconic in November. It was a free virtual concert. It went very well. So then we said, let's do this with this good enough message that you're good enough. God loves you enough to exchange his life for you. But then on top of that, you're also good enough to go get counseling. Like it's okay for you to do this. So that was kind of the message. And we did part one in March, went really well. And part two is coming up just a little bit after this recording. And then it'll be available for anybody to get anytime after June the 15th on my site. And we're hoping that the show, the lights, camera, action, live band, it's a fun, just amazing show. Even if there was no message, it's a good show, right? Great hip hop, family friendly. You can watch it by yourself and hear some in depth things. You can watch it with your kids. But at the same time, there's literally a call for if you need counseling, go get help. I bring my actual counselor on stage, and we reenact actual sessions we've been through. Actually, this one was a lot more vulnerable than the first one, so it was just that doing that was difficult, but we've seen the fact that it's broken some barriers down for other people saying, man, maybe I should consider this too. And that's been cool to see.
I love it. I absolutely love it. The
Mhm.
vulnerability, the fact that you're going out and you're actually doing something, I think is phenomenal. And I will tell people whether you are a mental health advocate, whether you are trained and licensed, whether you are a layperson, you can do something to make a difference in the life of another person. And you are doing that.
Thank you.
I wanted to back up for a moment. You have a song that
Mhm.
is titled, well, actually, is it the whole album? Is it titled Good Enough or is it just one song, one single?
Well, we don't the EP Good Enough is coming soon, but I've dropped singles that we're doing. I've been dropping singles for the past year and a half that are all in the shows.
Okay.
So there is an album coming called Good Enough, probably this fall.
Okay, I love it. Okay, so I'm definitely going to be looking for that because I've seen, as you said, I've been seeing certain things kind of drop here and there, and
Mhm.
they've been phenomenal. We were
Thank
playing one of your songs a little earlier, and I was fascinated with the lyrics because it does so much. And just thinking about that song, it touches on the fact, of course, like you said, that God loved us enough to do these things. But there was another piece in there that was kind of in the beginning where it talks about the fact that we're kind of chasing these other things. We're looking for pleasure and maybe our career and the accolades that we have. But you're like, wait a minute, why aren't you good enough? Why isn't just having God good enough?
Yeah.
So if you could speak to that. I love it when I get to talk to people about their lyrics because
Oh
I
yeah.
know what they were thinking when they wrote it or when they decided to sing it. So please share.
Nah, it's fun. It's especially with hip hop because you packed so much in a short period of time. So that's Streets of Gold. I love that song. I actually wrote that on vacation. I was at a beach house looking at the water, chilling, and I just woke up that morning. The beat was in my head. I was like, okay, God's giving me some inspiration. So I went out to the water, and I was the first thing. Just woke up this morning, needed your presence, and I started thinking about that. Like, after I get that out of the way, what's the things my heart started to go to? Why don't I own this beach house? Why is my bank account in this way? Why? And that's when my heart starts to dibble and dabble into that stuff. And I was like, this is not a, check the box. I'm no longer anti-materialism because I know God. We'll look at a hip hop artist and say, oh man, look at all the chains, they're gaudy. And then we'll look at somebody else who doesn't have those, but they've got 7 homes. And that's the same thing. So like we all will go after stuff and the stuff isn't wrong. But when my heart doesn't feel complete when I don't have the thing, something's wrong with that. And I was looking at why do I feel incomplete or less successful or less this, that, and the third because, and that's just a honest struggle. So I wrote that to remind myself that the streets of gold I'm looking forward to in heaven, the peace, the escapism, if you will, from a lot of the crap we deal with here, whether that be materialistic, whether it just be getting away from it. All the stuff that heaven promises is the presence of God, which is the very thing that God has promised me right now today. So why am I waiting for then to get the peace that I claim I really want? If I really wanted him, I'd be happy. And so that's kind of the refreshing myself of like, the more satisfied you are with God, the more you can do everything else in its proper context, whether that's ministry, whether that's enjoying some time with family, vacationing, material things, is God that brings that peace. So at the end of the song, I say, everything I want in heaven, I already have. And that's the point of that. So,
Right. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really glad that you shared that from your heart and the fact that you were on vacation and looking at these other things. And I think we all do that. For at least for me, I can't speak for anybody else, but I
mhm,
can speak for me. I'm looking around and I'm seeing, wow, I started in this same space when this person started, and their social media account is
yeah.
like blowing up, or they've got a brand ambassador sponsorship, like they're working with Dove. Like, what's up with me? What,
Yeah.
people don't want to work with me? What's going on? And we do that. And I don't honestly, I think that if you are in any space, I think that sometimes the enemy and sometimes it's our flesh. I think it will basically say, wait a minute, look over here, look at this shiny thing, look at this thing over here. Maybe you're not good enough, or maybe you haven't done enough, or maybe they don't deserve it, and maybe you really deserve it. And it boils down to the contentment, which is why I love when Paul said, I've lived in basically in palaces and mansions, and I've also been in jail or lived in very lowly places. And no matter where I've been, I've learned the secret. And the secret is contentment. The secret is that I've learned that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And it doesn't matter where he puts me, whether he elevates me or whether he allows me to live in a lowly place, no matter what, if I keep my focus on him, I'm okay. So
I mean,
I like the
it's
fact that
like
you
you
shared
said,
that.
it's did God say? You know what I mean? It's did God say you're good enough? Did God say you're worth it? Because if He did, why don't you have? And it's the serpent's tricks all over again, he just ties it right to our heart that He knows desires these things. We have to continually just remind ourselves we don't have another way out other than no, God did say, and I'm believing that. That's all we have is the word. We say that all the time, but He shows up again to Jesus, and He's like, "Hey, what about the da?" And all the word says. And so, like, all we have is what did the word actually say? That's all we have. That's the only guard we have. Do we believe the word or not? That's all we have. Simple and deep at the same time. So it's just did God say all over again.
Mhm. I love it. Now, what has God directed you to do in terms of the additional work that you have? I know we have Good Enough, and I'm excited about the concert series. I hope that it's going to be an annual thing or however often that you do it. We're happy to support however we can.
It'll be four this year, 4 times a year, and
Awesome.
going
Awesome.
forward, we'll see what God does.
Awesome. I love it. So, 4 times a year, we can look forward to this, which is great. Now, tell me more about the Safe House project. I'm just excited about that.
Yeah, sure. So 2016, went over to South Africa, did some mission work, my pastor and and had a chance to work with this orphan care center. Shout out to Curis Global, and we're about to leave this place and taking care of these children. And I'm like, hey, before we leave, what else do y'all need? And they say, we really need a safe house. And I'm like, well, what's that? And I had no idea. And they began to explain in horrific detail what happens to with the threat the young ladies live in as they develop over there. There really isn't a 911 to call and all that. So we came back, and as I get off of the plane, the first thing that hits my phone is Hampton Roads, Virginia, 13th in the country for sex trafficking. And I'm like, what is happening? And I'm just getting flooded with. I just So we just said, hey guys, we're going to make an album. We're going to call it Safe House. We're going to help them get this house up. We're going to give them every dime. We're going to raise money. So we went to work. And in my church, one of my friends, Christy, and another one of my friends, Brittany, both said, we've wanted to be a part of fighting human trafficking forever. What do we do? And I was like, I don't know. So we started sending press releases and figuring things out. And then they're like, well, what if we did a 5K race? And they just started to take a life of its own. And eventually we got the funds over there for the house to go up. But Christy and Brittany started saying, well, what do we do to duplicate efforts here in the States? Because there's 300,000 kids here too. How do we always take care of our mission friends in South Africa? And also, how do we start to duplicate things here at home? So we formed Safe House Project as its own entity, separated it from my nonprofit. I remained on the board. They became CEO and COO, and they have been just killing it. And the work they've been doing is providing a channel for us to forever fund our work in South Africa with our foundational friends there. But then also, I literally got an email from them today about another safe house that's opening up in Montana, and then we're opening up safe houses across the states. These past few years, we've added so many beds to the national landscape, and it's just been crazy to see it all start with an idea and a rap album and a bunch of crazy friends saying, let's end this. So we have a very aggressive goal of ending trafficking in America by 2030.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I keep saying that, but everything that you're saying, there are definitely things that are on my heart. If anybody who is listening has not seen the movie Priceless,
Mm.
that may give you a decent idea of what Legend and the group that he's talking about are doing. And that does go into some detail about human trafficking that exists right here in America. And honestly, last year we might have been able to put a dent in certain things because if you don't know it or not, a lot of it happens in plain sight, and a lot of trafficking goes on in big cities or when there are big events. So when there's the NBA finals or the Super Bowl or big major league baseball things, because people can hide in plain sight, right?
Mhm.
You can get people from one place to another. So when we didn't have as many of those things last year, there was a little part of me was like, thank you, Jesus, that that a little less places for people to hide, right? And so for me, I looked at it as a blessing in disguise. But there is definitely still a need, both here and abroad. So if people want to help and support the
Mhm.
Safe House Project, how can they do that?
Safehouseproject.org. Safehouseproject.org. You can give, you can get in touch with Brittany and Christy. They're always looking for advocates. We have a free training that we created just for corporations called iamonwatch.org that you can watch at any moment. And it does what you just said. It lifts the veil of what trafficking actually is, gives people the empowerment to say, if you see these things, report it. No, you're not going to get in trouble for reporting anything, even if it turns out to be a bust, but you might have just saved a life. If you're on a plane and you see this activity, this is a hand signal somebody may use to say, help me when they're walking. All those things. So we did a free training that anybody can watch. And we've got police departments, corporations, city officials showing it to their staff and becoming On Watch certified. That's the way anybody can get involved. So I am onwatch.org or safehouseproject.org to plug in. And Brittany and Christy will be happy to connect with you, your organization, your military base, your police department, your corporate, anything. Because like you said, it's in plain sight. One of the one of the things about COVID was like all the major events, right? They went nowhere, right? Which could be a blessing in disguise. The other thing is a lot of trafficking is happening, by the definition of trafficking, is happening at home with family and friends. So a lot of kids ended up trapped at home with their traffickers.
Mm.
And so what we may not, what we, the reason why good enough and this counseling piece is so important, and identification of victims and awareness is so important, is we haven't begun to see the outflow of signs of abuse, of trauma, of mental illness that we're about to see the avalanche of over the next 6 to 18 months. And we need to be prepared as a community, as a country, as a people, as a church. When you see this, this is signs of trafficking. This is signs of mental illness. This is signs of somebody who's been depressed or suicidal. I mean, these are signs of, you know what I mean? This is controlling nature. This person has somebody they're watching out. Why are they in middle school with 2 phones? What is that about? Like, we need to know what that stuff is as we get back to school, as we get back to church, as we get back to community life. Because like you said, it's plain sight. It's plain sight. It's not white vans and creepy people. It's something different. It's, hide where people can see you and you'll never get caught. So that's why we did all that work and why we do that work, because it can't be us as an organization. It's got to be us as a people saying we won't tolerate it.
Amen to that. And if anybody has doubts about what he's talking about, there is a book called The Slave Next Door. And they talk about literally people in your neighborhood. Yes, your neighborhood, people in your neighborhood who are victims of sex trafficking right now. And I just found this out recently. I had no idea. I had heard of Christine Kane. I
Mhm.
never knew her story. Never knew her story. So she's another example if you want to find out more about the horrors that go along with the life for some people when they are caught up into this, when they become victims. But they can move from being a victim to a survivor. And I'm not big on labels. You guys know that. I'm not big on labeling. I like to listen without labels. But there are people who are survivors right now.
And
And
we highlight and celebrate them, because um, without them surviving and without them saying you can make it, we I haven't been through trafficking, and most of our staff has not. We have a lot of advocates and volunteers, and we are actively hiring survivors for that purpose. But it's an opportunity to say, listen, you can make it out, you can heal, you can survive, and everything will work out well.
and for the healing part, I think that goes back to the good enough and the work that you're doing there. I know part of that work is related to raising funds so that people can afford counseling. And I think that's one part of the quote unquote problem. The other part, of course, is having enough people that are able to do the counseling. We need more mental health providers. But the part that you're working on, which is the fundraising, so that we can have funds so that people can go to counseling, tell us more about how that process works.
Yeah, I have a nonprofit that I do a lot of this work through, that will allow me to do outreach, music, evangelism, and start organizations through. And so I set up a different fund just to help cover some counseling costs, because with the season we've been in, counseling is expensive anyway, and rightfully so. It costs a lot, but we the season we've been in, some people have had to choose between feeding their family and educating their kids. And if you're in that decision, how in the world are you going to afford $150 an hour? So we're working with counseling entities and networks to make it available for people to be able to say, hey, I need counseling. I'm in this state. I don't know what to do. And so we've got, if somebody was to click a link on our site and get connected to somebody, they would give them a cash deal where it's discounted because there's no insurance involved. And then they would say, hey, this person can really only afford $20 a month. Can you cover them? And we've got some funds to the side to help people get between 3 to 5 sessions to get started,
Mhm.
um, and maybe more if people give more. So we can do that. We're not going to do it for free because there's got to be some buy-in. But I don't care if it's $10, $25, $50. We'll step in and cover the rest, because a lot of counselors will take their stuff down 50, 60% to help somebody get in the door. I have seen that consistently across the board with counselors, individuals and organizations I'm dealing with. They just want people to get the help they need, which I appreciate. So we
Absolutely.
have a fund set up to do that.
Absolutely. And you said something there, the buy-in piece or skin in the game. People call it all kinds of different things, but that is vitally important. I will never forget. I was in med school, so one of those starving medical students that would go to meetings just because they served pizza and they had let the cat out of the bag. We health we not even healthcare people, undergraduates will go where there is food. Okay, so if you want to have a meeting and you want people to be there, serve food.
Or food. They coming.
They
They
will
come.
come. We will come.
Listen, I'm coming
Come
still.
for food.
I'm there now. So
Exactly. But I'll never forget. I was in medical school, and I decided, oh, I'm got a lot going on, a little stress here and there. So let me go ahead and start getting counseling. I'll never forget this group, and I will share their name because they're good people. But the Brantley group,
mm,
husband and wife team, kind of like my husband and I have our own mental health program. But husband and wife team, and I remember them saying, "We know you're a student. We know you really don't have a lot of money." He
mhm,
says, but you're going to pay something because I want you to understand that there is value in what you are getting.
mm,
And if you had to pay out of pocket, we know you couldn't afford it, but that's not the point. The point is, we want you to understand that number one, there's value. So you need to put something in, you need to have some kind of financial commitment. And number two, when you are able to provide for other people, we want you to reach back and do the same. And I
mhm,
remember that my fee was $5 a session.
mhm,
$5 a session. And like you said, this was for, $150 session easily.
mhm.
But they were gracious and they were kind enough. So I'm glad to see that you have people that are not only giving, but folks who are providers who are giving back and saying, hey, we're willing to reduce the cost or do a discount or things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I've got one counselor that'll remain unnamed. They are they're telling people the same thing. Like they've given me, I can handle this many people if they come through Legend or through Good Enough, and I'll let them know that this is what the invoice is. I'm invoicing Legend for this much. She said, you're never going to see the invoice from me. I'm going to pay it out of my pocket, but I'm going to make sure that they pay something to know what they're going to do. For the same reason, I don't care if it's $5, $10, they're going to pay something, and me and my staff are each committed to take this many people each, so it's multiplied. And she said, and here's the invoice that you're going to receive, but I'm going to zero it out because we're not going to charge you. So she's not making any money. And that's my point, that these counselors have the heart to say, you need to know there's value here, and I need to keep the lights on. But if you need help in this way, I'm really not going to make any money off of this. So it's just, I've seen that heart of giving consistently with the counseling community. I'm sure there's some people out there who operate differently, but I haven't met them yet. So it's been really refreshing to see that.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So, one of the first questions that I think I just consistently get if I'm interviewing a musical artist is, when did you decide that you were going to do what you're doing? And then a tag on to that was, how did you get into the industry? Yeah, I'm sure you've had that question before. But the unique spin that I thought was interesting anyway was, the platform that you have. How did you get into using that particular platform? You did answer that for Safe House and you answered it somewhat for Good Enough, but for the other things that you were doing in terms of your music specifically before March of last year, how did you decide to use that particular platform or niche?
Sure. I'd been in music since I wrote my first rap in fourth grade, and I went to a private elementary school, so it was like nerdy. It was about the stock market. So my first rap was about the stock market. It was the weirdest rap ever. But I really got serious about music. 15 to 16, I started producing, started writing, put together a couple groups in high school just for fun, and I missed the days, and it was just like there was nothing attached to it. It was just fun. And then I ended up getting out of music as I went to college. I actively put it on the shelf just to focus on what life was going to be. Got into some financial services, this, that, and the third, and then had a whole transformative situation in my life where, my father came back into my life and he passed away, and I had a chance to forgive him before he did. And then I met Christ, and my life started to change. And then my wife dragged me, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife dragged me kicking and screaming to a Christian hip hop concert. I was like, a Christian what? No, this sounds really stupid. I don't want to go. And and I went, and then my life was changed because I had never seen the gospel um, in the culture that I came from. And so people are loving Christ. They're reaching people my church never touched, and all of the music was knocking, and it was what I came from. And I was like, man, I didn't know you could do this. I thought I really just had choirs and guitars for the rest of my life, and that was it. Like nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to. So it was cool to see the gospel in my culture. So that night we put a plan together to start making music that was glorifying Christ and that was authentically hip hop, and we just never stopped. And that was about 15 years ago, and we just kept it moving, and that just ended up taking us. We ended up opening up for some national artists here and there. Ended up getting invited to the UK. So our first trip out of the country was for music, 2011, and traveling around the country and doing that stuff and preaching and doing concerts. And we just kept going. And then in 2013, I left my job to start doing it full time. And I did a hybrid record label model, independent record label, and nonprofit to where I could do the music and the merch and the shows, but also have an outlet to do what I was talking about in the music, which kind of brought the service together. So my being in the industry has been very, best I can tell, non-traditional. There's been no record label, there's been no deals. We're booking tours, we're making the calls, we're putting it together, we're piecing the things out. And I just got signed to a booking deal recently, like during COVID. But that's it. We just kept on going, and it's just been transformative for me.
It's beautiful, the work that you're doing and the way that you got into the work that you're doing.
Thanks.
Um,
Did I answer that question?
you did. You did answer the question. You did answer the question.
I, I finished and I was like, wait, what did they ask? I hope I was in the right vein.
Yeah, I do the same. Trust me, I do the same thing. I do the same. I do the same thing.
Mhm.
We had another question that was related more to the work that you are doing through Good Enough.
Okay.
So if a person was interested, so let's say during your concert series, because they're virtual,
Mhm.
how exactly do you reach out to people, or how do people connect with you if they say, hey, look, I've decided I do want counseling
Mhm.
services. What do I do? How do
Yeah.
I make the next move? How does that process work during the concert series?
Sure. So the way the concert is set up is and we'll probably switch it up in number three, which will come out in August. But like we do kind of there's concert piece, and then all of a sudden it shifts, and I'm sitting down with my counselor when having a moment. Then that leads into the next song, and then we do it again. So we kind of break up the conversation throughout the concert, and then the last part of the conversation, we'll literally just turn the screen and say, "Listen, if you need help, we're here for you. Click the link below and get connected." Or if they're not in a place where that's possible because of whatever medium they're watching it on, we have the link on the site, which is just legend.tv/counseling. You can visit that now, legin.tv/counseling. And if they use that and click a link, they get connected to our partners, and then they just take it from there. And what happens is if somebody needs after that some financial help, our partners come back to us and say, "Hey, so and so came through this, and this is what it looks like they can afford. Do you sign off on this, and will you pay the bill?" And we just say yes, and then they go from there. So that's kind of how that process works. We wanted to not be the ones capturing everybody's information for lots of reasons. Want them to go straight to them, and but they come through our sites, and there's a level of trust has been built through the concert. But then they go straight to, and there's a couple different options of who they can go through on the site, and we're building that the resource now for that.
It's beautiful.
Mhm.
One of the other questions I did want to ask you about when I have folks that are in kingdom business or kingdom entrepreneurs is how they are juggling entrepreneurship with family life, with other work. And you got at least three things going on because obviously, as an entrepreneur, you have your label and you're working on your music. And then,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, you have your nonprofit. Obviously, you have your wife and your family. So, how do you juggle those things as an entrepreneur?
Man, the sticky question. So I think for me, one of the things I had to do is realize what I'm good at and what I'm terrible at. And the things that I'm not great at feel like remedial things that anybody should be able to do. This spreadsheet here or this calendar there. And so I think the temptation is, as the entrepreneur, the one starting things, you feel like you need to be able to do all the things. And then eventually people will come that you can pass the things off to. And there's some truth to that. But I think there's also the hard part is you tend to keep things for so long because it's your baby that you don't give them away as soon as you should. So I have on staff with me an assistant who helped coordinate all this, and she literally does my entire calendar for me because I suck at doing my calendar. So I don't plan coffees, I don't do anything unless it runs through her because I'm not going to plan it well. And the reason I'm saying that is because, as simple as that sounds, it's freed me up tremendously to be available for the things I'm supposed to do. So I'm supposed to be writing the music, visionary guy, meeting with people, doing this and the third. I can do fundraising. I'm decent at it. We've gotten where we are because I've been fundraising, but it's not the job I'm supposed to do. So I'm actively in the middle of transitioning somebody else to be over development. So I'm not doing that because I'm in my best place if I'm speaking, if I'm talking to people, if I'm writing music, if I'm just sharing vision, if I'm doing this with you. So I'm saying all that to say the more stuff I get off my plate, the more available I found myself naturally being for my family, for my kids, for all that type of stuff. Now that's actually backwards, because if I look back at it, um, those, and I don't give myself a lot of grace, so I'm probably better at this than I think I am. But the most important thing is, what does my son need? What does my wife need? What does my daughter need? Do that first, and then build the business after that, and build the ministry after that. I've done both at the same time, and when you say yes to something, you say no to something else. So I've seen, oh man, I shouldn't have taken that meeting first. I should have checked with the home first and making sure that meeting was okay to take, and it didn't do that. So the only way to juggle for me is to reprioritize and constantly be in a state of reassessing. Did I accept this meeting well? Did I put it through the proper channels to make sure the family's good? To make sure that somebody who plans better than me, i.e., my assistant, is good? Is everybody, or am I just running off of my what I think is best, and then whatever happens happens. So there's a seesaw to it for me, but the only way I juggle it best is when I'm in my best space. Like, hey babe, how's this meeting look? I was literally about to set up a meeting today, and I said nope before I say yes. Hey babe, how's this look on this day? Am I missing something? Is there a trip with the family I'm not thinking? Is there a graduation thing? Like, well, make sure before I take this. And I found my life been tremendously better that way. So that's been the only way I've been able to juggle all the things, is to pass time management over to somebody who manages time better than me, because I'm the visionary creative dude. I'm over here on Mars thinking about crazy stuff, and we need those things, but then we need the legs to do them. So that's been helpful for me.
That is key. You start with your big rock. If you're thinking about putting everything in a jar, right? You start with the big rock first, and then you add the smaller rocks, and then the pebbles, and then the sand, and then everything else, and then it all fits. So I love that you start with, you reverse engineer it. You start with the thing that's the most important, and then you work everything else around it. And I think that's something that you absolutely have to do if you are, especially if you're a business person and you work at home and you also have family involved. It's key. So
Yeah.
that's good stuff right there. So for anyone who's listening who is an entrepreneur, put a pin in it and write that down someplace. Write what he just said down. Go back and replay it and listen to it again, because I promise you that will save you in a lot of ways. It will save you. And it's Bible, right? Seek you first.
Yeah.
Those things we're supposed to be putting those things at the first part.
I'll say this too, man, since you mentioned work from home, and this is super simple. I don't mean to patronize anybody, but I've just consistently found, from young to more seasoned, like this is just like something that's really simple. If you're working from home because of the season we're in, or because your office is transitioned, or because you're, a solo entrepreneur, like when you get up to get to work, you've got to have a mental shift from I'm at home to I'm at work. There's got to be like I'm at my kitchen table by myself all day. Doesn't matter. Change your clothes. You know what I mean? When you clock in to work, because you gotta be no more serious about clocking in your own schedule than you were clocking for somebody else. So like I don't care if you're putting on a button up, you're putting on the polo, whatever you would wear if you walked outside to an office, wear that when you go to work for yourself. It changes your whole perspective of, oh man, I'm clocked in right now, versus I'm at the kitchen table. I can take a lunch break whenever I want. Like, clock yourself in and discipline yourself. I found it, and maybe it's just helpful for me, but I found it to be a mate. When I'm at work, I'm like, no, I'm at work now. Like I changed my clothes. I walk downstairs, but I'm at work. So things are different for the next 7 hours. And there's the freedom of, once you do that, then you can enjoy that I'm working from home. But if you don't do that, you find out that somehow you ended up less productive. Wow, what's because in your PJs? And so anyway, I don't know if that's helpful, but
I think that mental space. I've even had people tell me that when they are working from home, they have some routine, like you said, whether it's getting dressed or looking nice. One of the other routines that I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. This young lady said that when it's time for her to go to work, because she's used to leaving the home. She's used to going out of her door. And when she hits her door, she's just like, okay, got to get my game face on. I'm ready to work. Then when
mhm.
she comes home, it's like, I can relax. I can put work out of my mind. She had a hard time doing that. So what she says is what she would do is when it was time for her to start her workday, she would go in the front door and come back in through a different doorway. And then when
Okay.
it was time for her to end her day, she'd go out that door and then come back in her front
I
door.
love it,
And
man.
she's like, that just sent a little switch in her mind that just says, I'm home. You
I
know,
love it.
I can shut the work down, which I think whatever works for you.
That's smart. I love
Wonderful. It is. I thought that was really smart.
it. Yeah.
So we had two more questions, and one is about your podcast. So
Mhm.
you have a podcast.
So we relaunched the Legend podcast. We got 3 more episodes on the way now. Actually, we were meeting about it this morning, and it was for us. It was just, how do you how do you have conversations around the season of what we're communicating and pushing, so it becomes like everything is working concurrently, whether it's music, sermons, podcasts. So the first season, the first 6 episodes, or 3 more on the way, are just about mental health in different aspects. Like I interviewed a pastor in Florida, Orlando, a friend of mine. Their senior pastor, large church, their senior pastor committed suicide about 7 years ago. And I was like, I don't know what that looks like to go through. As you know, you think of church sometimes, it doesn't talk about certain things, unfortunately, and they lived it, and mental health became by default a natural focus. So how did they handle, they one of the people that attended their church is a huge counseling figure in their community. So they literally let that man preach for 6 months and nobody else did, and he took the entire church through counseling for a half a year. And I was just like, I've never heard of anything like that. So we did that, and I talked to my cousin, who's also a pastor, but he's in a more different context. And so he was talking about mental health and stuff. So we're trying to have conversations about it, but it not just be like a mental health podcast. So this season will be focused on that because of Good Enough, and the next season coming up, we'll have a different spin on it. So for us, it's culture, life, theology, relevance. How does all that stuff mesh together? And how do we have guests on that can help us to do that? So I do a lot of talks about racial inequalities and justice and unity and inequities, and we talk about that regularly. So there'll be a season where that's what we do. But that's kind of where the podcast goes. Like stuff I'm making music about and stuff I'm preaching about, we'll be talking about in the podcast and the conversational sense like this. So 3 more episodes on the way for season one, which will be kind of focused around Good Enough, and then another season will be coming in the fall shortly.
I'm looking forward to it. And since you brought up the S word, when people open a door, I walk through it. So this episode is going to have a listener advisory to it, of
Mm,
course, because we're talking about mental health things. But anytime we talk about suicide in any way, I
mm,
realize that that might be triggering for certain people or it might bring up certain concerns for them. But that is one of the things that it's right on your information about Good Enough, that's one of the things you talk about: depression, anxiety, suicide. And one of the things that's on your heart is suicide, particularly among the youth. Would you share more about that?
Yeah, I just I think the biggest thing we could all admit, I've never struggled with suicide, right? And but I've 1 degree of separation from folks that have lost their life to suicide. And one of the things that always seems to be consistent is when somebody does take their life. Most of the time, from what I see, and this is from an uneducated standpoint, is man, not them. What did it come from? The surprise, the shock, the I thought they were happy. And the reason being is because suicide and anxiety and all that has been on the rise anyway, but it's much more on the rise in those college students and down. So what is it about our youth that are thinking, man, this is hopeless, let me check out now, and what's going on there? And that concerns me. So the reason why the virtual concert was important to me, not just the messaging and the music, but the medium of, man, if I can reach somebody in their dorm room, or I can reach somebody right on their phone, they can see this pop up on their Instagram feed, and they click a button, watch a show, and their life gets saved. It's 100% worth it for me to keep doing virtual concerts, which are not terribly easy to do. That can be floating around out there and available, so that anytime, any moment, somebody that can be in Algeria on a Wednesday and they can get a virtual concert. Who knows what God will do from there? They can be in New Mexico on a Thursday night and get it. I just want to be able to reach and save a couple of lives in this generation best I can. We really, the entire team, like it's a team of about 20 people, band, lights, everybody. And I'm like, man, if we do all this work and we spend all this money and we do all this sweat and rehearsal and editing and deadlines and nervousness and all that, and one person does not slit their wrist, is 100% worth it. And
Absolutely.
that's kind of, we just 99 for the one is our motivation before we hit record. Is if one person, and it's not just like we need to say that to check the biblical box, we need to believe that thing, or we need to get off the stage. It's got to be worth it for one person. And so if God allows us to see 2 people, then that's like, oh, that was a bonus. That was not a bonus, but that was a blessing that He let us even see. The benefit was more than one, because we're happy with one, and that's kind of how we try to live.
I think is a blessing and a bonus. And that was a mic drop moment right there. I do. I thank you for everything that you guys do. Um, you are a blessing to the community, the body of Christ, but I think you're also a blessing to people that are not inside the body of Christ, who who we long to reach. So I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. I want to thank you so much for your time. You are phenomenal. The work again that you're doing is phenomenal, and we will be looking for the rest of Good Enough to come out. Thank you for the teasers, the releases. So I just wanted to share. You can find Legend's work on YouTube. You can find it on his, obviously on his site. It's www.legend.tv, and you will find all kinds of good stuff there. /counseling if you're interested in the counseling information. If you're interested in tickets for Good Enough too, it's there. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. You have a blessed day.
You too, Dr. Bergina. Thank you so much.